Porsche looks the same, and just like a VW Beetle. Just to clarify, the one on the left is the VW. Well, jokes aside, there is a grain of truth behind those words. Porsche is well known for an evolutionary rather than revolutionary design, even though one can tell the different generations apart, which I will show you in the following simple guide. For each generation, I also have chosen the most special car in my opinion and put it in an extra spotlight. Let's just quickly mention the Porsche 356, representing the dawn of the 911. As spiritual grandfather, he already incorporates some of the basic trademarks, such for example the rear-mounted boxer engine. On the exterior, the lineage is visible too, with the iconic round headlights mounted on a raised fender and a deeply falling roofline. The car lived through 4 stages, whereas the first, Urversion, can be spotted by the use of a split front window. The 3 following upgrades are signaled in the naming with the chronological letters A, B, and C. The first true generation of 911 should replace the aging 356 and even out its flaws. This means that the successor should increase practicality and update the technological base structure. An example for the increased practicality is the use of larger windows, allowing to enjoy the scenic drives a bit more. The upgrades involve a new suspension concept attached to a unique frame which is no longer based on the VW Beetle, and most prominently the switch to a 6-cylinder boxer engine in the rear. The engine started its life with 2.0 liter capacity and was developed by none other than Hans Metzger itself. As a refresher, this is the man that will later become the head of motorsport department. As such, he was responsible for the legendary 917 race cars, and in the later years also developed the TAG Formula 1 engine for McLaren. Back to the 911, which was presented to the public eye in 1963 at the International Auto Show as Porsche 901. However, a certain French automotive manufacturer objected to naming with a 0 in the middle of a 3-digit number. So what is the most simple way to deal with this problem without having to change all your marketing and documentation records? The answer is simple. Replace the 0 by a 1. And by this, the legend of the 911 is born. Thank you, Bishop. By the way, there were around 80 units produced before this change in naming was applied. With respect to the design, the 911 made a step forward over the predecessor. The overall design has become sleeker with the increased wheelbase and narrower body, as well as gained more character by abolishing the bubble-like and soft-washed body. The front fenders still housing the headlights are more distinguished from the hood, which itself became flatter in shape. Below the headlights, an eye-catching chrome intake and turning signal is featured. The rear itself has become more edgy too, with 2 small separated rear lights at the end of a strongly pulled down roofline, on which an iconic rectangular cooling vent is placed. In terms of body types, this generation features the standard coupe, cabrio and also the Targa. The Targa is basically a cabrio for which only the roof part directly above the passengers can be removed, and is easily distinguished by the silver colored thick B-pillar, acting as a safety hub in case of a rollover. The engine grew with increasing model age, from the initial 2.0 liters up to 2.7 liters in the legendary Carrera RS 2.7, representing the homologation model for racing on track and gravel. To be competitive, the car was set on a strict diet till the poor thing clocked the scale at 960 kilograms in the sport variant. And yes, that was a more comfortable version with additional 120 kilograms on the ribs available, out of the fear that they might not find 500 crazy enough buyers, which were needed at last. In the end, 1,500 units were produced from 1972 onwards, with a share of around 200 in the sport configuration, and many as hybrid versions somewhere between. The car doesn't hold back in terms of an aggressive design. In the front, a prominent large cooler intake is placed, often covered for a number plate on the street cars. The fenders were extended to widen the track, especially at the rear by 42 mm. Small quiz as a break. What is a car optimized for racing in common with an ordinary duck? I have to disappoint you. It's not that they are both aggressive and bite you. However, they have both a part called Entenbürzel, which is the German word for ducktail, which itself is part of a duck that holds the tail feathers. On the other hand, this is the nickname given to the rear spoiler, which increases the stability and reduces the aerodynamic drag, enabling the car to accelerate up to 245 kph. We all know that decals add power, and so I assume that the widely colored ones on the RS do as well. However, the engine itself adds a fair amount too. The modified engine produces around 15 kW more in total over the second most powerful 2.4 liter derivative of the engine, accumulating to around 155 kW in total. The tradition from the 356 over the 901 to designate the upgrades internally with an additional letter continued until the year 1979. In 1974, the 911 carried the letter G and gave its new generation its nickname. The design developed further too, with a bumper carrying a quite eye-catching black rubber damper to accommodate for US regulations. They demanded that a low-speed impact does not leave any damage to the bodywork. The rear bumper has undergone the same treatment, and the previously separated rear lights were connected by a red panel in which the Porsche name resides. Besides the bumpers, the overall bodywork and stance got slightly more aggressive and increased in size, which will be a continuing trope throughout the evolution of generations. A smaller change in design are the wing mirrors, which shape evolved from the round one of the previous generation to a rectangular one. Interesting fact about this generation is that the entry-level model of the 911 and the carrier variants between 1978 and 1984 was replaced by the SC. SC thereby stands for Super Carrera and replaces the chrome parts by blacked out ones, and from 1979 onwards the ring around the headlight is body colored. The SC also introduced the first true open-top 911, with a concept presented in 1981 at the International Auto Show. This now fully topless car was made possible by advances in material technology to pass the according safety requirements. The car hit an on-card market with a lot of positive feedback, so that it went into production in 1983. The engine of the G-Series started where the previous generation's Ace left off, with the 2.7 liters RS engine. Some models even used basically the same engine and later increased the capacity up to 3.2 liters. During the G-Series lifetime, the oil crisis hit the world and fuel and emission regulations tightened up. To fulfill them, the engine was modified to incorporate electronically controlled fuel injection and the use of a catalytic converter. Not even the worst crisis can stop the pursuit of power, so the G-Series brought the first turbo into the light of the world in 1974. The turbo models have their own internal designation, and this first one is better known as Porsche 930. The car already features some of the things we associate with the turbo name. There is for example the widened fenders, especially in the rear where it overshadows its more civil smaller siblings by 120 mm. The front features a front lip, and in the rear a flat and long spoiler is added to increase stability and in which the intercooler is hidden. The early engines have a power output of 191 kW out of a 3.0 liter capacity engine and the use of a single KKK turbocharger. In 1978 the engine's volume was increased to 3.3 liters, leading to a power of around 220 kilowatts. The later models can be spotted by the use of a slightly larger rear spoiler. The later version was available to buy in all three body variants, unlike the first one that was exclusively available as a coupe. This car shaped the reputation of the turbo models by getting the nickname Widowmaker, due to its difficult driving characteristic at the limit. However, this is not too surprising given the young age of the turbocharged technology with significant turbo lag, a rear engine layout, and a relative short wheelbase of only around 2.3 meters. The G-Series was in production for almost 16 years and was severely in need of a more advanced technological base, which couldn't be hidden anymore even by the ongoing improvements over its life cycle. The new generation also has to accommodate to the new mindset of the customers. They weren't happy anymore with just having a fast sports car, but wanted to travel in comfort too. In 1989, a new generation was unveiled with a new design, around 85% of new parts, and significant innovations in technology. The 964 Carrera 4 featured ABS, a power-assisted steering as standard option, and the paid option to have an automatic transmission to cover the comfort aspects. The car also could profit from the lessons learned during the development of the Halo Car 959 by the use of its intelligent all-wheel drive system. Another improvement over the previous generation is the switch from a torsion bar setup for the rear suspension to a McPherson design. A short 2 months later in 1990, the Carrera 2 was presented as a rear-wheel drive only car. This naming convention with a 4 representing four-wheel drive and a 2 representing rear-wheel drive still holds true to this day. The 964 still uses the air-cooled 6-cylinder boxer engine with an increased volume to 3.6 liters from the previous generation and further improved efficiency by using dual ignition. This change has raised the power to 184 kilowatts and was available in all three body variants. The 964's front and rear bumper are now integrated into the overall design and lost the G-Series rubber dampers. The design of the bumpers has become quite distinct compared to the predecessor too, with a rounder and flatter shape. Two long horizontal inlets characterize the front bumper. On the backside, a movable rear spoiler is used to improve the aerodynamic properties when needed without spoiling the design at a standstill. The rear lights are more angled compared to the nearly vertical standing ones of the G-Series. A small change with respect to the wing mirrors can be spotted for the models from around 1992 onwards, where the rectangular ones were replaced by the more streamlined cup mirrors previously available as an option. In 1991, the turbo was reintroduced on the 964 base with a similar treatment as previously, with wider fenders, a fixed rear spoiler and twin exhaust tips, unlike the single one used for the past Carrera models. The left exhaust, however, was only used when the boost pressure valve of the turbocharging system was opened. Up and with 1992, the turbo used the same 3.3-liter engine of the late 930 turbo with modifications done to the control unit, injection and intercooler. This boosted power up to 235 kilowatts with a more constant power delivery. In 1993, the model got its upgraded 3.6-liter engine ready for 265 kilowatts. These two versions can be distinguished from each other when looking at the brake calipers. For the first batch with the 3.3-liter engine they are black, and for the ones using the 3.6-liter engine they are red. Another less obvious giveaway is the use of a multi-piece wheel design for the 3.6-liter engine turbos. If you wanted to feel the wind in your hair and listen to the turbo whistle, then this generation won't be for you, because the turbo was produced mainly as a coupe, with a very few exceptions. The spiritual successor of the 2.7 RS was built in 1994 as the 3.8 RS with the same intent as an homologation car for racing. The car uses a strengthened version of the wider turbo body and the usual racing upgrades. This includes wider tires, larger brakes with cooling intakes in the front bumper, and a front splitter to balance the fixed rear wing. Of course, the car also lost everything not essential for driving to reduce weight by 2 to 300 kg. The same spirit of the 2.7 RS continued with the availability of a touring and a rare lightweight version. To propel the around 55 produced street-legal RS models, a 220 kW naturally aspirated 3.8-liter engine is used, based on the 3.6-liter Carrera. The 964 had a very short production life compared to its two predecessors and was replaced in 1994 by the 993. The new car didn't introduce as many new technologies as the 964, but still incorporated some significant upgrades. For example, changed the rear suspension concept again, this time to a multi-link suspension, which remained until today. The engineers also upgraded the control unit for the 3.6-liter engine and installed a new valve control, which was easier to maintain. All changes on the engine teased out a power between 200 and 220 kilowatts. The design changes are more subtle too over the predecessor, with the front hood and fender smoother connected to each other. A unique detail is the round panel gap between the fender, hood and front bumper, which makes it easy to identify as a 993. The headlights are stronger angled and also deeper placed on the fender. The smoother integration of the bumper with the rest of the bodywork is especially notable at the rear and gives finally the impression that the car is one solid piece. This generation also has a symmetric exhaust compared to the one-sided one of the predecessor. This generation features again the usual suspects of versions with the Carrera 2 and 4 and with the respective S versions, each in Coupe, Cabrio and Targa available. The sportier S version thereby uses the slightly wider turbo body with the same front bumper. In this, two horizontal slats found on the base Carrera, which were taken over from the 964, are replaced by three distinct intakes. On the lower side of the front bumper is an intake placed with many slots for the brake cooling. The S version share not only the wider body, but also the suspension and brakes with the red calipers from the turbo. If the S version shares so many components with the turbo model, is the turbo then really needed? Well, fear not, the turbo still has some exclusive details. This involves for example the lovely curved fixed rear spoiler, which still is the home of the intercooler. In this case, the intercooler has to cool down the charged air for a twin turbocharger setup, which can use smaller turbine wheels than the single unit before. The new engine provides 300 kW over the 265 kW of the predecessor, and if still had not enough, you could opt for an upgrade to 330 kW in the later production years. The 993 Turbo is the first one to transmit its power through all four wheels, which since then has become pretty much synonymous with the turbo models. The open-top fanatics were disappointed again because Porsche only produced the car as a coupe, unless one of them could grab one of the 14 which were built unofficially by Porsche exclusive for a private owner. However, for packaging reasons this one had to be satisfied with the old engine of the 964 Turbo. 345 of the last models of this generation received the S treatment. This means that the fog lights were replaced by cooling air intakes for the brakes, which itself were upgraded and feature yellow calipers. Another set of air intakes can be found on the rear fenders to feed the engine, adding another feature we associate with the modern turbo models. On the rear, a new double-decker spoiler is added and a quad-pipe exhaust system underlines the sportier character. Time didn't stand still for the racing department either, and soon they had to find a replacement for the 964 3.8 RS to compete in the FIA GT2 category. This means it was time for a new legendary homologation model, the GT2. Unlike as for the previous RS models, this one was based on the turbo. This offered the availability of 316 or 330 kW for the ones based on the later production models. Aside of the power increase, the GT2 continued the recipe of the RS models, losing 200 to 300 kg of weight over the standard turbo, for example by changing to rear-wheel drive only. The use of wider tires demanded the add-on of the signature riveted fender extensions. To improve the aerodynamic properties, the car uses a front splitter with small winglets at the end, and a huge fixed rear wing with triangular air intakes incorporated as pillars. The number of cars is a bit of a mystery, and somewhere between 50 and 60 road legal ones are assumed. Even less of them have the optional Club Sport option, which doesn't add luxury, as for the predecessors, but a roll cage, lighter seats, a 2-MOS flywheel, and a fire extinguisher, which hopefully never had to be used. This was already the first part with the air-cooled generations of the 911. Which is your favorite 911 of this generation so far? Feel free to share them in the comments section. Thanks for watching, drive safely, and have a nice day.